Hello YouTube! Now that I've got my cell phone camera to work with, I figure why not do another video? And why not? It's my channel and I can do what I want. This video is going to look at a philosophical-ish question based on some conversations I've had recently online. See, if you've paid attention to some of my previous videos, you'll know that I'm a theist, specifically a Christian. This particular channel isn't an apologetics channel, so I'm not going to be talking a whole ton about it here, but by the same token, when I deal with philosophical discussions, it's relevant to point it out. In this case, I want to look at a claim that I've heard from many different atheists over the years. It's a claim that has a superficial validity to it, but when we examine it in depth, it really isn't a very good claim at all. That claim goes like this: you're only a Christian because your parents were Christians. If you grew up in a Muslim country, you would be a Muslim. Again, there's a certain superficial aspect to that claim that's accurate. Most people have the same beliefs as their surrounding culture does. The problem for the atheist is that we can grant the entirety of that view, and it has no bearing on whether or not Christianity is true. Because just as a false belief could permeate an entire culture, so too can a true belief. One need look no further than this. When I was about 5 years old, I believed the world was round. Why didn't I believe in a flat earth? Because I believed what my parents told me. They told me the earth was round. I accepted that as truth. But if you were to ask me now, what is the shape of the earth? I will answer, it's an oblong spheroid slightly bulging around the equator due to rotational forces. And if you ask me, why do I believe that? I'm not going to say because my parents told me. Why not? Because as I grew up and studied science, I learned arguments that justified the position my parents taught me. I grew up on the plains of Colorado, and when we drove towards the mountains, it was easy to see that the mountains didn't just slowly get larger from a microscopic dot on the horizon. No, they popped into view top down. You saw the top of the mountain, then you saw lower down the mountain, then as you got closer, you eventually could see the base of the mountain. This is because the mountain was over the curve of the earth and hidden from view. While I've not experienced ocean life, I've read enough history to know that sailors saw the same phenomenon at sea. You always saw the top masts of other ships before you could see the body of the ship. And when you came to land, you always saw the highest elevations before you could see the beach. When it comes to the ocean, it's even more damning for the flat earth view because, as they often say, water seeks its own level. Water won't make a hill in the middle. The best you get is ocean waves. When it's relatively calm, ocean waves cannot account for how you can see the tops of 1,000-foot high mountains before you see the base of the mountains. Even in extremely stormy seas, you're not going to get 1,000-foot high waves to obscure your vision in that manner. There are other experiments you can do yourself. For this one, it works especially well if you're on the west coast looking out towards the setting sun as it goes into the ocean. Again, for the same reason that water is going to be as close to flat as possible on Earth. If you lay on the ground and watch the sun dip below the horizon, the instant the last bit of sunlight goes away, stand up. If you're around 6 feet high or so, the horizon will be far enough away that when you stand, you'll be able to see sunlight from the sun itself once again for a few moments. This is because your eyes are now higher up, meaning you can peer over the curve of the horizon just that little bit further. And if you're too short to see the effect, just look into the sky. You'll see clouds illuminated from below. This is because the sun, having dipped below the horizon relative to where you are standing, is shining upwards. Again, this is relative to your position. The underside of clouds being so high in the sky become illuminated. Again, this is all stuff you can confirm with your own eyes. Okay? There are many other reasons to accept a round Earth, but the point is made. My parents taught me that the earth was round, but I do not argue that the earth is round because that's what my parents taught me. I argue that it's round because I have a reason to assert that the earth is round. In the same way, yes, I believe in God, and as a young child, I believed in God because my parents taught me that God exists. But I do not currently believe in God for that reason. I believe in God because the arguments for the existence of God are compelling and sound for me. And I am a Christian specifically because I've looked at those arguments and have weighed the evidence, and Christianity is the most sound philosophical and/or religious viewpoint I have encountered. To say you only believe in Christianity because your parents are Christians is so utterly dismissive of the actual arguments that I have for why I hold to my views as to be borderline offensive. Just to give you a reason why I hold to Christianity, well, let me start with theism in general. Since this video is to show that my reasons have nothing to do with my parents' belief system, I won't get too much into the details yet, although there's always future videos if people are interested. But for me, if I accept the validity of logic, which I do, then for logic to be valid and sound, there must be some kind of entity that shares all the basic features that theists have consistently argued God has. For a bare bones view of God, God is eternal. That's outside the realm of time. He was never created and is in fact self-existent. In fact, there are many more things we could consider, but those are all for different videos, so let's stop there for just one moment and consider that. If we consider just that point briefly, we'll see that logic, first of all, doesn't exist as a thing, okay? It has no being. Instead, we say that the universe exists in a way that is logical. We can deduce the laws of logic based on the way the universe functions. But in order to deduce the laws of logic based on how the universe functions, the universe must exist before we can deduce those laws. If nothing exists, we cannot create laws of logic, for there is no way to deduce those laws from nothing. Given that, the laws of logic only exist for as long as the universe exists. This brings us to our first problem. Either the universe has a beginning or it did not. Now, if the universe did not have a beginning, if the universe is eternal, then we've just discovered something that is eternal. And remember, eternality is one of the attributes that is commonly ascribed to God. So in an eternal universe, by definition, something eternal exists. But there are philosophical problems with thinking the universe itself is eternal. After all, the universe consists of space-time. These two are coexistent. That means that if space is eternal, then time is also eternal. But if time is eternal, then for anything moving slower than the speed of light, time has to pass. If there is an eternal amount of time, then there would have had to be an eternal amount of time gone by before we get to today. This is a different problem than Zeno's paradox because we're not going from a starting point to another starting point that's a finite distance away. We're looking back on a starting point that is an infinite amount of time away and without being able to go at an infinite speed. We are currently trying to get to present day from that point. Without being able to go an infinite speed through time, we cannot cross an infinite amount of time. Zeno's paradox involves cutting up distances into infinitesimally smaller and smaller amounts, but the speed one traverses it is still an entire distance per unit of time. So this is a very real problem in stipulating that the universe and therefore time is eternal, and it's not solved by just pointing to Zeno. Thankfully, very few people believe that the universe is eternal. Modern physics is pretty sure that the universe began to exist at the Big Bang, which means that time is not infinite. It had a defined beginning just as much as space did. That means that in one sense, there is no before. There clearly was no temporal before, but there can still be a logical before. And what I mean by that is something can be logically necessary without being temporally necessary. Tempor, not temporary. Just to be clear on that. So if a logical cause needs to happen before something else happens, it doesn't need time to actually pass. You just need the thing to happen before the other logically. So we can probe the obvious question that comes up. If the universe began to exist, why did it begin to exist? Does the universe have a cause? And here's where logic once again forces us to conclude in the existence of something that is self-existent. If the universe has no cause, then it must be self-existent, for it has the power of existence within itself. That's what self-existent means. It's not created by anything else. It's within itself. But if it did have a cause, then that moves the question back one step, and we have to ask it again. Did what caused the universe itself have a cause? Now, many people will at this point say, we don't even know if the rules of logic applied before the Big Bang. But remember what we're trying to establish here. We're trying to establish that the rules of logic are sound. If they did not apply before the Big Bang, then it seems foolish to insist that we must follow those rules now. After all, if not having logic enabled the existence of everything, what use is logic? So no, if logic is to have any meaning, we must insist that logic was in effect before time began, at least logically before, if not temporally, that's such a hard word to say, before. Which means that whatever existed before the Big Bang must exist in such a way that logic is still valid. And that means that while there could be any number of logical causes before the Big Bang, there could even be a massive giant chain of causes that stretch on for a long, long time. But it must be an actual number. It cannot be infinite. Now, let's get back to my main point. I would say that arguments such as these are what lead me towards believing that God exists today, because every attribute of God I can probe logically seems to be logically necessary if we are to accept the validity of logic. One could always jettison logic, but if you jettison logic, who cares if something is irrational? Logic has already been jettisoned. There's no point in caring if logic is valid at that point. But agree or disagree with my conclusions that this points towards God, there's one thing you cannot deny. I may have been a genius as a child. I don't know. May have been. But there is no way my parents taught me this information as a 5-year-old. To say you only believe in Christianity because of your parents is fundamentally stupid when my arguments for theism is clearly more advanced than a 5-year-old can grasp. So look, we can disagree on the arguments, but you can't pretend the arguments don't exist. You can't pretend that people only believe because of what their parents taught, as if people don't mature or grow or develop their own ideas or come to their own conclusions based on data they see. And furthermore, just because something is taught by one's parents has no bearing on whether it's true or false. Parents can teach facts just as much as they can teach fictions. In any case, this video is already getting on a bit longer than I wanted, so I'll leave it there for now. Let me know if you want me to address anything more on this sort of topic by leaving a comment below. Like or dislike the video as you please. And if I've earned your interest, a subscribe would be appreciated too. As always, have a wonderful day. Peace out.